Thank you for having me, but be mindful. Inviting me into your home is like having the world's worst foreign exchange student in your house. No, Mustafa, we don't squat on toilet seats. This and other useful lessons on The Daniel Natal Show. In his book Politics, Aristotle said that revolutions almost never happen due to the people rising up. They usually come about, he says, when rival oligarchical factions vie for power. History provides an example of this from the 1930s when rival factions were in a tug of war to see who could control the United States. On the one hand, you had financier Bernard Baruch. Baruch was a huge fan of Mussolini and supported him in the 1920s. He wanted to remake America to look more like fascist Italy, so he hired Gerard Swope to create a plan to take over America's economy. This plan would later be rebranded as the New Deal. In short, it called for the creation of 75 new government bureaus to control 75 key sectors of the economy. When Baruch went to Herbert Hoover to pitch this scheme to him, Hoover looked it over and was mortified. He said that the Constitution granted him no such power to control the economy. As the former president said in his diary, among the early Roosevelt fascist measures was the National Industry Recovery Act of June 16, 1933. The origins of this scheme are worth repeating. These ideas were first suggested by Gerard Swope of the General Electric Company at a meeting of the electrical industry in the winter of 1932. Following this, they were adopted by the United States Chamber of Commerce. During the campaign of 1932, Henry I. Harriman, president of that body, urged me to agree to support these proposals, informing me that Mr. Roosevelt had agreed to do so. I tried to show him that this stuff was pure fascism, that it was merely a remaking of Mussolini's corporate state, and refused to agree to any of it. He informed me that in view of my attitude, the business world would support Roosevelt with money and influence. That, for the most part, proved true. Of course, as an aside, this group's plan to merge corporate and state power prevailed, with the government after the New Deal controlling businesses through the new practice of licensing. Before the New Deal, you didn't need a license to run a business, or driving, or scuba diving, or braiding hair in a salon. Afterward, you needed licenses for everything, even little kids running lemonade stands. By the way, Alvin Toffler mentions this in his book The Third Wave, that the way societies are taken over in authoritarian coups is through licenses and credentialing. Baruch used exactly these methods to control the economy. After his New Deal was imposed, the government created agencies to regulate every sector of the economy, which is why we went from a slim skeletal republic to a bloated bureaucracy with a bunch of alphabet soup agencies. We acquired the Department of Agriculture, the FTC, FCC, NIST, the Department of this, and the Department of that. 75 in total, all with regulatory powers over the respective area of the economy they oversaw. This was, of course, to remove capitalism from the system and allow monopolies to take over. Baruch invited the biggest corporations to meetings to set price floors and to remove price competition from their respective industries. As economic historian H.W. Brand said, this was problematic since price competition is a key component of capitalism. The oligarchs didn't care, of course, about abstract notions of capitalism. Monopolist extraordinaire John D. Rockefeller, for instance, famously said, "Competition is a sin." This oligarchical group wanted to move past capitalism, past the Republican form of government, into something new. In short, it was the fascist remaking of America. If by fascism one accepts the quote attributed to Mussolini, although it's probably actually from Giovanni Gentile, that fascism is more properly called corporatism, since it is the merger of state and corporate power. Now remember what Aristotle said. In any revolution, they are usually opposing oligarchical factions. On the other side of Bernard Baruch, Gerard Swope, and the Chamber of Commerce were countervailing forces who would rig the system just the way they wanted it and didn't want Baruch and company to unravel it. According to an article by Alan Bellows, the League's principal players were wealthy Americans, including the leaders of DuPont, J.P. Morgan, U.S. Steel, General Motors, Standard Oil, Colgate, Heinz Foods, Chase National Bank, and Goodyear Tire. There are some who claim that Prescott Bush, father of the 41st U.S. president and grandfather to the 43rd, was also entangled in the scheme. This second group of oligarchs saw FDR as a puppet of Baruch and a threat to the Republic, so they decided to stage a coup to depose him. Today, this conspiracy is called the Business Plot of 1933. This very real conspiracy came to light when General Smedley Butler was approached by the conspirators to help them stage the takeover, and he informed on them, thus quashing the coup. Because of the very power of the players involved, though, the media was called into action to play down the failed coup attempt. And though Congress opened an investigation into the nascent coup, no one was ever brought up on charges. And in fact, the very powerful people involved had their names scrubbed from the record. As the article states, criminal charges were brought against no one, and the collection of prominent men implicated in the plot were immediately excused from testifying. In fact, all mention of their names was scrubbed from the committee's public report. The document stated that the committee had ordered stricken therefrom certain immaterial and incompetent evidence, or evidence which was not pertinent to the inquiry. The omitted bits of the report were later published by John L. Spivak when he was mistakenly furnished with a full transcript of the hearings, but the public accepted the additional information with indifference. Why this is important to understand is that history tends to repeat itself, bringing us to the next story. An establishment organ like Time magazine has shocked many observers when this font of officialdom recently released an article which seemed to concede to all the irregularities of the last election, such as laws being changed or ignored, bypassing the legislature, which is the only legal body that can change such laws, doing a runaround past the legislature. Local judges and county commissioners took it upon themselves to loosen voter integrity strictures, ignoring signature verification requirements and accepting mail-in ballots that came long past the due date. Such is the story broken by the Gateway Pundit about time-stamped footage of a vote-mobile van arriving at 3:30 and 4:30 a.m., driving directly into the TCF Center and unloading dozens of boxes each trip. This was 8 hours after the ballot deadline. And more than sketchy middle-of-the-night all-Biden vote dumps was the illegal rule change to encourage mail-in ballots. John Stuart Mill back in 1861 warned about them in his book Considerations on Representative Government. He wrote, "The proposal which has been thrown out of allowing the voting papers to be filled at the voter's own residence and sent by the post, I should regard as fatal." This was borne out just a few years later in America when vote fraud occurred, wherein mail-in ballots were used to try to flip the election against Lincoln. As reported by the Washington Post in their article, mail-in ballots were part of a plot to deny Lincoln re-election in 1864. Yet for all these facts, the media lied and told the public how secure the inherently unsafe practice was, opening the door to all sorts of, well, let's just say, irregularities. Of course, if the election laws were followed, the laws as passed by the legislatures, Trump would have unambiguously won every swing state, and by wide margins. But because of the unconstitutional rule changes and middle-of-the-night cloak-and-dagger vote dumps, a different result was teased out of the events. A fact admitted to by Time magazine, which has an article that says, "This is the inside story of the conspiracy to save the 2020 election, based on access to the group's inner workings, never-before-seen documents, and interviews with dozens of those involved from across the political spectrum. It is the story of an unprecedented, creative, and determined campaign whose success also reveals how close the nation came to disaster." Every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of the election was defeated, says Ian Basson, co-founder of Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan rule of law advocacy group. But it's massively important for the country to understand that it didn't happen accidentally. The system didn't work magically. Democracy is not self-executing. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream, a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it. And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures. Time magazine's spin on this is eerily reminiscent of Vietnam War propaganda about having to burn the village to save it, or having to rape the woman to protect her virginity. In this case, they had to neutralize the will of the people to save the republic. But here's the thing. The word republic comes from Latin, res publica. It translates as the public thing. But don't worry, a small group of men, a cabal, as Time magazine puts it, had to wrest the public's thing away from the public, to, in their own words, save our democracy. But as Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard said, looking at the military lockdown of the country, President Biden, have you declared martial law? Because that is what this is starting to feel like. Let our troops get back home to their families. What even the Democratic Congresswoman is admitting to is that this doesn't look like a republic at all. It looks like the aftermath of a coup to initiate the merger of corporate and state power. I think there's a word for that. The origins of this scheme are worth repeating. These ideas were first suggested by Gerard Swope of the General Electric Company at a meeting of the electrical industry in the winter of 1932. Following this, they were adopted by the United States Chamber of Commerce. Could reading the New American magazine boost your heart health, support your immune system, and help you lose 20 pounds of unsightly fat? The answer is no. But you should read it anyway. It'll keep you informed and provide information that cuts through the noise of lesser news outlets. TheNewAmerican.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on social media and hit that like button.